So you can be enormously well educated in one sense. You can have a perfectly coherent set of religious beliefs, but they're just a very small set of religious beliefs. And then you don't want to hear anything new because that makes the whole system fall apart. So I think that's part of it too. And then let's be honest, there are ethnic rivalries, there's racism in our world, you know, unfortunately. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. Robert, I know that you lived a number of years in Europe.
Yes.
And then you are constantly traveling in Europe. Yes. So when you compare the interfaith dialogue activities here in the US versus the ones in Europe, so what do you see like there are, so which one is like better or which one is improving, so you compare them?
Well, let me first say, I'm not enough of an expert on Europe to really speak for Europe. It's a kind of a big place and there's a lot of different countries. Here's a general observation. Much of it, because of the nature of European society and thought, a lot of interfaith dialogue in Europe is very officially sponsored and sanctioned. In most countries in Europe, religion is part of official public government life. So in Austria, for example, where I lived, you had the Roman Catholic Church, then you had what was called the Glaubensgemeinschaften, they were called. So you had an Islamisches Glaubensgemeinschaften, a Jüdisches Glaubensgemeinschaften, a Protestantisches Glaubensgemeinschaften. So there was an official government religious body for each religion. And dialogue then was always an official thing, right? You get this bishop, you get this imam, you get this mufti, you get whatever, and they all sit around a table and talk and have a nice banquet, and then they publish a book. Now, that's okay, right? But very often, two things happen with that. One is that big parts of the religious community get left out. I mean, so for example, I don't want to speak too much out of turn, I don't want to offend anybody, but in Austria, the Islamisches Glaubensgemeinschaften, the Islamic Association, was entirely dominated by Bosnians, because Austria had had a long relationship with Bosnia for hundreds of years. Okay? The largest single group of Muslims in Austria was Turkish, but there were no Turkish officials. You see what I'm saying? So you could have this interfaith dialogue, but it was Bosnians talking to Christians and Jews, and no Turks, even though Turks would, you get the picture. So that's a problem with official dialogue. Somebody gets left out. All of the Protestant dialogue, we Methodists always got left out, because we weren't big, we were too small, so you get the picture. Even the Jewish community was divided on this. So that's one problem. And I think that problem is found across Europe, that things happen from the top down, it doesn't reach the grassroots. That happens in the US too sometimes, but I think, at least here in Dallas, one of the great strengths there is that churches and mosques in particular, but synagogues as well, groups like the IID, are really organizing pretty much grassroots dialogue. It's normal people like you all talking to other normal people. And that doesn't make the headlines in the newspaper. It doesn't mean that you end up with a published book. Well, sometimes, but you know what I'm saying? But to me, that is one of the good things about an American sensibility about dialogue, is that let's all do it. Let's not just send our leaders to do it in another place. That's the biggest difference I think. Is that useful? Other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Yeah. You mentioned about Christians in Sri Lanka or Muslims in Malaysia saying we have the only light, the world is full of chaos, so we don't have anything to learn from others. But shouldn't that thinking trigger, okay, if I have the only light, and if I want the world to be full of light, then I have to reach out to others so that the world will be full of light?
Yes.
So
it should. It should.
Because if they are so confident about themselves, they'll say, okay, I have the only light. There's nothing to be afraid of, so I'll just go reach out and then try to make everywhere full of light.
I think you're right. I mean, it would seem like there would be what Christians call a missionary impulse, right? To at least engage with other people, right? To talk to them nicely, try to share what you have. In Malaysia, they usually use the word dakwah for the Muslim community. But here's a difficult thing, and again, I don't want to offend anybody. I just want to try to speak realistically. In a country like Malaysia, to be Muslim is to be Malay, ethnically Malay. So the impulse to reach out is restricted by the desire to protect my ethnic community. And so you have two things working together. It's almost the same in Singapore, where it happens that all of these pastors who protested were Chinese and were Chinese speaking. Now the fact that they're only Chinese speaking then restricts who they can even visit with. But there was a strong element of also protecting my ethnic identity from being corrupted. And so if you're busy protecting your ethnic identity, you can't be very outgoing to other people. So I think those things both happen at the same time. Yes, in theory it should push you out, but sometimes if what's behind it is protection of my identity, then it just makes me build a cage around myself. And I think that's something that people of good faith in all religions need to get over, and simply look at our diversity and say, wow, we're actually a whole lot of different kinds of people, so maybe we should be able to talk to a whole lot of kinds of different people, right? I mean, there's no one ethnicity associated with Islam, is there? No, I don't think so. Certainly not with Christianity, certainly not with Judaism even. Okay, certainly not with Buddhism or Hinduism. So why should we let these sort of identity things keep us from being in conversation? I think we should be talking. Yes?
Actually, I have two questions. First one is, what happened to Richardson? I mean, how did Richardson change according to you? And the other one is, can you make a comparison of Singapore and other Middle East, other Far East countries? Like, as far as I understand, people are really able to talk about religion or beliefs or what do they believe, but how does that relate to other Far East countries like China or Japan?
Okay, well first let me start with Richardson. I mean, I think Richardson's a relatively simple story. It's a city whose economy was fueled by the technological industries and later by that is, say, Texas Instruments, North American Rockwell, formerly College Radio, etc. And of course, those are fields that attracted a very large number of migrants into Richardson in technical fields. Now, at some point, there becomes a sort of a mass of people. I mean, I still remember the old, on Greenville Avenue down near Beltline is what was used to be called Terrace Shopping Center. And sort of shop by shop, it was bought over by Chinese concerns. Then when it became all Chinese, then all of a sudden, people all over Dallas area who were thinking, where should I live, said, well, maybe I need to live there because that's where all the grocery stores are. You know, and then he sort of goes, woof. Okay. I think the same thing around the mosque, frankly. As soon as the mosque was there, then Muslims from all over the Dallas area said, well, that's a place that I want to live near. I want to be close to the mosque, and that's the center of the community. So I think that's what changed. And then the continuing boom of the technical industries and eventually telecommunications would make North Dallas a hot place for people who came from the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Turkey, of course, Iran, Persia, and Arabian and North African countries. I think that's basically it, as well as East Asia. Now, Singapore and East Asia. Singapore is an unusual place. I was just there in September. It's a place where religious discussions can be held in some freedom, as long as you never try to convince someone to join your team. So the rules are pretty strict. Everybody can talk about religion as long as I, as a Christian, never try to convince a Muslim to become a Christian, and the Muslim never tries to convince me to become a Muslim. And that's how they sort of deal with this pressure cooker atmosphere of a very tiny place with a very wide variety of religions, is that you just respect everybody's boundaries. Talk freely, but don't get aggressive. Okay? And that works for them.